You know, as I was sitting at the back there for the speech of the National Secretary, I felt a bit ashamed as one of the comrades was giving me the T-shirt of YCL. Because you see, I'm wearing a blue cap. And naturally blue means liberal. Whether you go to the US or you go to the DA in South Africa. So in case my dress sense this morning offends you, I hope that my input offends you even further in order to provoke debate and discussion. Most of the things about my so-called good name, as said by the chair, are not true, by the way. So do not believe everything that the chair says. But really, comrades, I think the task that we are given here is quite difficult from the sheer point of view of time, but also because a lot of what we might say might not be relevant to current circumstances. And so you need to take our input with the necessary caution, that perhaps ours might not be an accurate reflection of reality as it obtains today. There are two requests in terms of the topic or the theme that we've been given. On the one hand, we must share experiences. Our experiences of, the student movement, the PYA, and so on, organization and so on. But on the other, we are requested as well to reflect on recent contemporary issues and sort of share our thoughts about what we think about this or the other issue. So, despite that, sometimes we might suffer from memory loss because we are getting older and older. It could be that some of the reflections are not as spot on as we think. So you'll have to forgive us. So, but what are the starting points? I think the starting points, among other things, is to ask, especially in the context of the YCL, is to ask, where are we in terms of development in the country? In terms of the productive forces, in terms of history, in terms of human development. Where are we? What is the context? And others have argued that we are at a stage where we are experiencing some level of progress, but stagnation insofar as development is concerned, because the nature and character of our economy remains the same. It remains heavily slanted towards minerals, energy, and of course, the role and the place of finance capital. But to the extent that you have a financial services sector and a services sector that is sort of booming, you can attribute that and define it as some kind of progress in the development of our economy. And the issue is that for young communists, what does that mean? And as Gilbert was saying, how do you relate with productive forces, and how do you attempt to shape productive relations? That's the first starting point for me. I think that's one of the bigger questions. The other starting point is that where are we politically in the country? And I would like to argue that we are at a very interesting point where, on the basis of the maturation of our democracy, if you like, on the basis of progress and stagnation in the political economy, particular social and political forces are beginning to be unleashed to attempt to reshape our political reality in the country. Among those social forces, for instance, is the fact that for the first time since 1994, we're beginning to experience people like yourselves as you are seated here today. Most of you seated here today have not had any material contact or any material experience with the struggle for freedom. And as a result, there are questions of time and space. And the question that arises is, what kind of exposure do you have within the movement, within YCL, within the Communist Party, within the Tripartite Alliance, within higher education and within society as a whole? What kind of exposure do you have culturally, ideologically, politically, organizationally, and so on? And those particular elements or factors, how do they actually exercise their influence to shape the way in which you think of society and the manner in which you think you should change society? I argue, of course, there's a long debate, but one of the arguments I'm making recently, which of course is not yet a complete argument, is that I think we are beginning to enter also a period in the country that can be characterized as the next political transition, given just the sheer power of demographic shifts and demographic changes that are taking place in the country. Last year in the general elections, we had more than 3 million young people who were supposed to vote for the first time. And that's a significant number. If you consider how many seats, for instance, a party like the EFF got by receiving about 1 million votes. And so this becomes very important. The other important element, I think, for me is the state of youth within the context of our political economy today. What is the state of youth? Where are they? And how do they relate with the mainstream structures of our political economy? And then naturally and logically, the question should follow, what is the state of the YCL, and therefore the state of the Progressive Youth Alliance? Because the assumption is that the YCL and the Progressive Youth Alliance as a whole are the spears and the shields that must actually help the revolutionary progressive project of transforming our country into a better society. They are the shields and the spears that must always be constantly sharpened so that they are directed at the correct targets at all times. And you can better answer that question. But I'll give you some few examples which also relate to the experiences that we had when we had to confront the challenge of leading within SASCO and also leading within the context of the Progressive Youth Alliance. And then, of course, naturally, the next question arises, what then are the tasks of the moment? Let me say that in terms of the issues of the day, for instance, we'll return a little bit for a few minutes on the PYA. But in terms of the substantive issues of the day and the politics of the day, what sense can we make of some of the developments taking place in higher education in particular? I agree in part with Comrade Gilbert when he says the fees must fall movement is a phenomenon. But on the other hand, it's a phenomenon, and it might fade because it lacks a coherent ideology, strategy, and organizational form. That's quite correct on the one hand, but on the other hand, the struggle to exercise influence or political influence over young people can be quite rapid and dynamic in ways that might not be easily accessible for us to perhaps understand as the events unfold. Was one of the things that we should remember is that, even under a different context and under a different time, and of course, with the intervention of other subjective factors, such as the role of the liberation movement. But the 1976 generation did not declare itself heroic or revolutionary at the moment. That becomes an exercise and a task of historians and generations ahead to reflect with hindsight as to whether was that a revolutionary moment or not. Quite right again, to agree again with Comrade Gilbert, is that the only way we can fully understand and appreciate whatever political events that take place in our midst is to concretely engage on a theoretical interrogation of what those events mean. We should be able to interrogate them critically. What do they mean? And the question is whether the YCL has the capacity to do so. Are they passing events, as Gilbert argues? Are they the beginning of something profound? How are they shaping up on the ground? Where you are in campuses, you have seen this thing happening. What has been the response of the YCL, the PYA, and the ANC in particular? In terms of content, in terms of the political content, direction, and the theoretical content of these particular struggles. So others have then argued in 2011, when they were looking at the Arab Spring, they said it's revolutionary. And people jumped up and down. It's a revolutionary moment. And some of us wrote very quickly in response to that to say, no, but you need particular ingredients for something to really mature into a concrete revolutionary program. And as you have seen in Egypt and elsewhere in the Arab Spring countries, there was no revolution, see? So in part, Comrade Gilbert might be correct, but the issue is that the conditions may not be, or the manifestation of some of the protest movement might not manifest themselves the same across time and space. The issue is whether are we able to understand, if at all, what we see are germinating seeds of what might possibly come. So all I'm arguing for is that the possibility of something else more profound should not be ruled out, because the danger will be that we'll be lulled into silence and inaction, and other forces who are better organized and more acutely aware will then dribble past us and seize the moment and run with it, whereas the vanguard forces that have always led these struggles might find themselves at the back foot. And this thing might go in various ways that we have not imagined. The other element which is key about, or the other fact that we need to state up front about the fees must fall movement is the fact that the struggle for access to education, and in particular free education, is not a new struggle. It is historical and it is global in character. The International Union of Socialist Youth, the International Union of Students, the World Federation of Democratic Youth, etc., have always championed these struggles. They are global in character, and they have got a historical basis. Steve Biko fought and died for access to education in many ways. So the issue is about understanding the analogy of a relay. When you are in, those of you who understand athletics, that it becomes a relay. And as Gilbert was saying, particular moments might demand of particular responses and approaches at a given time. And it should be important that the YCL is a progressive formation, and the PYA broadly should be in a position to appreciate the positive elements about the fees must fall movement. Among others, of course there are a few of them, among others is the fact that it is okay for young people of this current generation to appreciate their moment in history, to appreciate their mission in history. It is quite okay, and the responses of the YCL should be able to also appreciate that fact. That's what we, in part that's what we want. That for every generation, there is a mission, and it must be identified, executed, and fulfilled. Or if you choose to be reactionary or lazy, then betray that mission. So I think that there are opportunities and challenges emerging in respect to these so-called new movements. And the positioning of the YCL and the PYA broadly is quite crucial, and that debate should be taking place if it's not taking place already. One of the things that, for instance, the spot document of SASCO argues is that as we advance, as Gilbert was saying, that post-1994 we don't demobilize. But one of the things that we do is that as we advance, how do we build what is referred to in the spot document, if not in the spot document, in the basic ABC policy document of SASCO? How do we build what we call a broad movement for transformation? And who should actually anchor that broad movement for transformation, and who should lead it? And I would want to argue that the Progressive Youth Alliance should lead it. And the question is whether, as these movements are emerging, where is the location of leadership in terms of organization, content, theory, and revolutionary morality? because you have the advantage of history, of memory, of capacity, of having all these experiences at your disposal. And therefore, you are best positioned as the most capacitated of organs of our people. You have got all the resources at your disposal. That is why the National Secretary can just call me wherever I am in the country and say, come and speak to us. There are all these resources of memory, of history, of capacity, of all of that, of legitimacy, that the revolutionary forces of change in our country have always been known and have entrenched themselves to be known as those that have been in our mass democratic movement. You've got that legitimacy of history, of contemporariness, of the correctness of many of your ideologies, of your theories, of your policies, of your politics, and so on and so on. So you've got easy acceptance, or if you don't have, you should have easy acceptance amongst the people that you lead, which is your constituency, the young people. And so the other element that needs to be appreciated, as I was saying slightly earlier, but we need to underscore it, is the fact that there is a moment of opportunity and danger if there is no appreciation of the fact that what you are dealing with essentially as well is a new generation of South Africans who are asking themselves the fundamental question: what was the liberation struggle all about, and what is the meaning of freedom today? In our context, in our campuses today, and in society as a whole. The second one is the element of appreciating the role and significance of technology, particularly smart technology, and the capacity it has to assist our revolutionary and political project to reach different and higher heights in our quest to transform our society. And this is where the National Secretary will have to really marshal the National Executive Committee towards. That, comrades, there is really no reason why we do not modernize our organizational machinery. The reason why we don't, I think, is because of laziness. Can I please have some water, please? I think the reason why we don't modernize is because of laziness. Because, I mean, I think all of us here, seated here, have got a smartphone. I think so. Well, there might be a 1% that is, there might be a 1%, of course. There's always exception to the rule. But the point is that majority of us do. So the issue is, for how long are you going to postpone that? I mean, there are many examples amongst us. Even some of our Mohammed is here, actually. You know, I'm happy that he's wearing a YCL t-shirt and is not at Virgin Active. You're welcome here, Chief. You can wear all of the t-shirts. But the issue is that, for instance, what are the lessons that we learn from the BDS campaign? Just from a modernizing point of view. You know, what are the lessons that we learn from the Arab Spring, from a modernizing point of view? Can we still rely on the same modes of organization, as we did previously? No, we can't. I mean, if you look at many other examples, including the first election campaign of President Obama in the United States, not the least of my favorite people for obvious reasons, but appreciation of how the element of youth and the element of smart technology or new technologies, if you like, how it was fused together to mount a very successful electoral campaign by any standard. Other factors notwithstanding. The other question that I think arises in this fees must fall thing, and I'll speak more about contemporary challenges because I'm younger than Gilbert, so I'm closer to the recent scenario than he is. So you should appreciate my indulgence on the current issues. Is that it then so appears, then the question must be asked, and you must answer it. Why is it that we have got presence in almost all campuses in the country, FET, University of Technology, traditional universities, and so on and so on? Why is it that we've got presence? And indeed, when you're looking at the images on TV, on social media, on WhatsApp, on smartphones, and so on Twitter, and so on, Facebook, when you look at the images of the Fees Must Fall campaign, indeed, the dominant T-shirts, the dominant symbolism, you talk of slogans, you talk of chants, you talk of songs, all of that reflects, T-shirts, reflect that we're on the ground, and yet it doesn't appear that at provincial or even at national level, there is the concrete and the clear leadership given in terms of content, in terms of policy, in terms of organization, etc. There isn't a clear, coherent presence of the PYA leading this particular thing. And so why is that the case? And why would, more fundamentally, I think for me, why would it appear, projected of course by a dominant liberal media that is not in favor of our perspectives, why does it appear that the narrative that is beginning to emerge is that which displaces the PYA throughout this thing? From the roads must fall up to this moment. Why is that the case? Because we know, as a matter of fact, that in majority of cases our cadres have been on the ground, which is what led to the situation at the union buildings. I was there, I went there. I mean, I told my boss that I want to go there, I want to observe this thing. Which is why, for instance, among other reasons, and this is where you begin to see the fact that there can't be a vacuum. Nature does not allow it. There can't be a vacuum. And that's why some of the comrades made it possible that at the end of the day, there was nobody who actually addressed the estimated 30,000 young people that were there. Because it's about contestation, it's about ideas, it's about politics. Nobody addressed there. The only person who addressed was the announcer from government. Why is it that you are at the union building, the seat of government? Why is it that you have a march of that kind and of that magnitude? For the first time in recent history, I don't know if Gilbert has got a deeper memory than I have. For the first time in history, there's a protest march that is not addressed. There's a problem. What kind of march is this one that is not addressed? So much as you had unity across campuses, across class, across race, across this and the other, across political affiliation and so on, in terms of this march, but you also had elements of disunity. Because then the one element of disunity was raised by, among others, arguing that we've got historically black and historically white institution. Let's start from there. A reality given to us by history. The others are saying, no, we've got leadership of our own. You know, especially the comrades from TUT, the comrades from SASCO and so on. I heard them saying this. And now we've got leadership of our own. Comrade Ngabo and all of them from these historically white institutions can't come and address us because they are our peers. See, they are all here with us. The only people that can address us is the national leadership. So then there was a stalemate that this is but of course there were also other factors and reasons that but you see the point is exactly that you should never allow blank pages in history, and you should never allow a vacuum to exist. Because as we speak at the moment, opportunistic political elements, or political elements that are opportunistic, can view that space and actually take it over. As we are beginning to see now that despite the progressive nature of the struggle for free education, and despite the fact that indeed we want to see cooperation, alliance, and solidarity between students and workers, but other elements who do not share in our vision and our perspective of the kind of society we want to create are political opportunistic elements that may seize the moment and run with it in front of our eyes. And the only thing we can do is to whistle. Say, hey, imkile madoda. So we shouldn't allow that space to exist. We shouldn't. So if we believe in the concept of building a broad movement for transformation, then we should lead that broad movement for transformation, based on our own concrete experiences and theory of the need to build broad fronts depending on particular moments in history. So some of these political elements will begin to widen the scope of the fees must fall, and they want to widen the scope, broaden it. You know, it must generally be a national political project. So this thing that the YCL and the PYA participated in is now, there are certain vultures who are now waiting to say, let's seize this moment and undermine the very same forces that have always championed these struggles. The other attempt is really to personalize the issues. That no, the reason why we have problems of lack of transformation in higher education is because of plain demand, or it's because of the national secretary, or it's because of the vice chancellor and so on. Of course, we're not going to discount the role of individuals, but it is a distortion of reality to simply reduce everything, whether success or failure, to individuals. In fact, I'm one of the few people, I've got one or two areas of difference with the General Secretary of the Communist Party, which is on principal matters. But one of the things that I have argued, especially since 2009, is the fact that I think you might come to your own assessment and your own conclusion, by the way, but this is my view, that actually I think is one of the most successful, if not the successful, ministers of higher education. And we can, when we have time, some other time, I can explain what I mean by that. In terms of policy positions, in terms of initiatives, and so on and so on. So in closing, just in closing, there is a danger, comrades, that we ourselves, as the PYA, and this is based on the experience I've had. Now let's speak organization now, organization. There is an attempt to want to first separate students from the mass base of the youth. I don't know where that comes from. That no, these ones are students, they are not us, these ones are youth. There's no theory there are no politics, it's wrong. The youth of our country is constituted of various components. Others are at school, others are at varsity, others are at work, others are unemployed, and so on and so on. These are young people of South Africa. This is the constituency of the YCL. The same thing you find in the ANC Youth League. No, these ones are SASCO. They are students. Must not elect them. It is degenerative politics. And that is why, because there's no vacuum. If you remove politics and political education in a political formation such as the YCL, something else will come in to assume that space. And that will be the antithesis of what the YCL is, and it will be the antithesis of politics and political education. That's what will happen. Because there's no empty space, right? I mean, the fact that I can see the door, the exit, and the entry door does not mean that in between me and the door there's emptiness. So, and then the other narrative is the one that says, the YCL and SASCO are different, or the YCL and the ANC Youth League are different. Really? Is that the case? There are no attempts to make a nuanced argument about the convergences and the divergences, the complementaries and the contradictions, the similarities and the differences. Generally, it's one narrative, very degenerative, backward, and reactionary. No, the ANC Youth League, they are not us, we are not them, we are different, it's not our people. But when you ask, but hey, comrades, Kanti, are these not formations of the Congress movement tradition? They say yes. Okay, but these comrades, in terms of their conception of revolution, in the context of South Africa, don't they believe in the National Democratic Revolution as we do? They say, yes, they do. I say, okay. So, but comrade, but these formations, have they not also adopted the Freedom Charter? I say, yes, they did. I say, comrade. Comrade. These comrades, are they also not believing in democracy, in principle of non-sexism, and so on and so on? I say, yes, they do. I say, so then, comrades, but then, what's the fight all about? I mean, we confronted this thing. And when I came to the University of Pretoria in 2001, comrades could not even look into each other's eyes directly. That's how bad it was. So I came from COSAS at the time. And when I got to campus, I joined both the ANC Youth League and SASCO. on campus. Well, I came both from the Youth League and COSAS in my township. Then I joined SASCO on campus and the Youth League campus, the Youth League branch on campus. And in 2002, the following year, as you would know, the history of the YCL and the revival and the relaunch of the YCL, Comrade Jacob Mamabulo was the national coordinator that helped with the National Leadership Corps that helped to revive and relaunch the YCL in the country since it was launched in the 1950s. I was in the interim leadership of the YCL on my campus. So, I was SASCO, ANC Youth League, and YCL on campus. So when you are saying to me, and I've also been COSAS, so when you are saying to me, let us fight those comrades of the Youth League, you are actually saying I must fight myself. I don't understand that instruction. I don't. So, the YCL will, of course, emphasize the centrality of ideology, of class, of exploitation, and so on and so on. But it does not mean that there are fundamental contradictions. The PYA, if it works, and if it exists, and if it is alive, should discuss this from branch to national. What is the best organizational form we should have or we should express at campus or in higher education in particular? Should we continue to have contestation? That you go to this campus, the YCL is contesting the Youth League and SASCO. The Youth League and SASCO is on this side, or SASCO is on this side and the other side. You get there, you're like, but comrades, no, really. When you ask, why is it that you are fighting? I'm telling you, for the past more than 15 years that I've been in the PYA, for the past more than 15 years, I can tell you, I've never received a political or a coherent reason. I've never received it. When you ask the comrades, you can ask now here, that somebody stand here and tell me, why is it that there are battles between the PYA components? Nobody will give me a coherent response and a politically sensible response. Nobody. I challenge you, all of you here. I think you might be 200 or so. All of you. Give me that response. If you are to give it to me now, then I'm going back to join the PYA again from the start, because my experience and my learning has been useless. But I'm telling you now, I've asked this question. And that is why, Comrade Mzilikazi, we obliterated when from the period late 2002 at the University of Pretoria, we obliterated the fights, the factions, the hostilities between the PYA components on campus. We obliterated them completely. For a period of about 8 years, there was harmony and coexistence and a clear line of march in terms of how we proceed. Because we refused to degenerate into politics of personalities, the elevation of personalities, personality cult. We refused it, we rejected that. Because we opted for higher level politics and a higher level of existence and articulation. So it's not a beauty contest, you see, between the chairperson of the YCL and the chairperson of the Youth League or SASCO, etc. It's not. It's about the program that we have. And so, yeah, that's my input, comrades. And I hope that I have provoked you enough, if not by my cap, which is blue and liberal, then by what I've said. Thanks.